There has been really, not even in Canada, I may say, not yet a system for making music work on television, for adding something to it by virtue of the camera being there. But radio, really, to me, is still the best way to present music and to talk about music in combination with it. So I've been writing documentaries on subjects like the life and times of Schoenberg. I'm planning to write one on music and the life of Thomas Mann.
You write the documentaries, then you read your scripts on
I read the scripts, and in preparing the documentaries, I put in a lot of mileage interviewing people who knew the subject, whether they knew whatever the subject might be from a favorable or unfavorable point of view. In my fairly recent documentary on Schoenberg, I interviewed a number of people who certainly represented the naysayers rather powerfully. And this provided a quite lively show, I think. It's been great fun to do, and I'm still a fledgling in this. I'm still just learning the sort of technique of documentary that you know so well, but it's great fun for me. So I am used to this side of the microphone.
I'm wondering how many subjects you're able to handle all at the same time.
I've never been in the process of writing more than two at once. I've never done two of the same media at once either. I've occasionally written a television and a radio show at the same time, because the radio ones do require a lot of research. The television ones, strangely enough, are much easier to write.
Gould, how do you ever have time to do all this along with your concertizing? And the festival, the Stratford Festival, is a very important facet of your musical life, isn't it?
These auxiliary things, such as writing documentaries or possibly doing the Stratford Festival, are to me much more fascinating than giving concerts, because anybody can give concerts.
Oh, is that so?
Well, just about anybody, sure. I find myself bothered by the idea that the concert as an institution, I think, is dying. I can't conceive that 75 or 100 years from now, when Aunt Millie can have rectangular television in her bedroom and watch Bernstein and the Philharmonic, who will still be going strong at that time, from a reclining position, why will she then be bothered with the local symphonette? And consequently, not to disparage the local symphonette, I simply feel that the future is in media that gives some kind of permanence to what you want to do, what you want to say. And to me, television and radio are very valuable in that way, because they give, at least they satisfy my ego to the sense that I feel I am putting down something that remains in a somewhat permanent condition for some length of time.
I think it's awfully hard to make a forecast like that and have any reason to feel that it's going to be an accurate one. Think what people felt a few years ago about concerts, about records, say. Mm-hmm. When radio came along, this is the end of Victrola records. Well, it wasn't at the end, it was really the beginning of a great renaissance,
yes, great expansion. You can't deny that the record industry, for one, taking only that as an example, has changed not only public taste and the demands of performance greatly, it's really changed the whole concept of listening. It's beginning to, I shouldn't say it has changed it yet, it's beginning to build a concept of what I could call, for want of a better word, narcissistic listening, of listening that is given a sense of judgment not by the sort of force of a mass verdict imposed upon one person as a member of an audience by 3,000 other members of that audience, but of a verdict that is imposed simply by the pleasure or non-pleasure that can be obtained by sitting at home and deciding for yourself. I think when this continues to happen, and when the fidelity of recordings increases, I cannot but see that or some future form of it will be, the real satisfaction of musical performance.
Well, the same prognostication was made 30 years ago about live music when television became popular, that live music would diminish. Mm-hmm. Instead of that, my Lord, how many symphony orchestras are there in the country now?
Yes, but could it not be some kind of marvelous last blossom of the whole concert? Because the concert,
it could be, but
the concert as an institution is such a very recent thing. It's only had a life of about 150 years,
true,
really.
Yeah.
And and considering the fact that music has had a life still short as arts go, but considerably longer than that, by about 6 times in the form that we know it. It seems to me that we really cannot either forecast, if we can't safely say that it's going to die, as I've said, then I don't think we can safely say that it will live in its present form.
I don't think so either.
It will live in some way. Possibly.
I just don't say anything.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the festival at Stratford in Canada.
Well, the Stratford Festival has begun 10 years ago as a Shakespearean festival. It began with a magnificent stage which was designed by Tanya Mosevich, the daughter of Benno Mosevich, the pianist, as a matter of fact. And around that stage, at that time, there was put the flappingest tent, and also the hottest one that you can imagine. 5 years ago, they built a magnificent permanent building around this. The stage is 3.5 sides enclosed by the audience. It's one of the most marvelous, intimate, dramatic, beautiful places to hear Shakespeare or to make music. Making music wasn't discovered there until about 3 years ago. There'd always been music at Stratford, but until 3 years ago, we played at a converted hockey arena, if you can imagine. And that was the sort of conditions we now would like to forget, because after 3 years ago, we moved into the festival theater. We became properly part of the festival. And since then, music has been flourishing in a quite remarkable way. What we're trying to do is to build a community of performers, something along the lines of Rudolf Serkin's festival at Marlborough. Except that our hall, of course, is much larger, and we do, give concerts which have to attract a couple of thousand people rather than
Are they chamber music size?
We've done everything up to full orchestra, but the thing that works best in that hall acoustically is chamber music. It's a magnificent hall for chamber music, less satisfactory for full orchestra.
Well, do you pull in audiences with
yes.
limited to that type
yes,
of audience?
Yes, Stratford has been one of those success stories that shouldn't happen, but it has. It shouldn't happen because it's situated in a town of 20,000. There is no major city closer than Toronto, which is more than 100 miles away, and by all, efficiency odds, this should not have worked, but it did work. It's a dream of a place.
Are you the administrator, or are you the artistic director?
I am one of the people who works in music there. I have colleagues such as Oskar Shumsky and Leonard Rose who share with me some responsibility of designing a series of concerts that try not to look like the sort of concerts that one could hear in the neighborhood arena during the winter. I think we've done some pretty imaginative things. As an example, last summer we commissioned a ballet on a work by Lucas Foss. Remember the Time Cycle of his,
Sure.
which was done here a couple of years ago at the Philharmonic? Well, we commissioned a ballet on this, which was received with a good deal of hostility, I may add, by the critics, but we thought it was pretty marvelous. And that's the sort of thing that we try to do, not simply concerts although naturally we do some straight chamber concerts as well.
Do you perform?
Yes, I usually play myself 3 or 4 times during the season.
There's one subject that has interested me, Glenn Gould, in connection with you for a long time, and especially last year when you played the D minor Brahms with Leonard Bernstein. And as people will recall, Bernstein made a speech before the audience saying that his conception and your conception collided more or less, and he wanted to, well, I won't say exonerate, but disassociate himself. No, it has interested me to find an explanation. In what way two musicians, two artists of the caliber of you and of Mr. Bernstein can approach a standard symphonic work like the D minor Brahms Concerto and have such diverse conceptions of the piece that Bernstein in this case felt that he had to disassociate himself from?
I don't know that there's a satisfactory explanation. As far as what actually transpired last year, I seemed to be the only person around who felt that Mr. Bernstein's speech was full of the best of good spirits and great charm. And I sat backstage giggling before playing the thing. I could hardly stop laughing when we started. I thought it was delightful. But there is no solution to this sense of collaboration that's demanded by a concerto. Part of the concerto idea is, of course, the sense of non-collaboration, the sense of willingness of the virtuoso, so-called, to show off. And I think it's it's the traditions that emanated out of that prompted me to do what I did, because what went on last year was in no way a particularly unusual performance of that particular Brahms concerto, except for one factor, and that was that our proportions of tempi, our proportions of dynamics, tended to be scaled closer together than is usually the case. There was less if I say exaggeration, I don't mean it critically of other people's performances, but there was less exaggeration in that sense of the word. There was less divergence between what could be called the masculine-feminine approach of the piano concerto, between first theme and second theme, between the barking of the orchestra and the placidity of the piano. It was a much more tightly welded unit, what I wanted to do. Now, Lenny felt that in order to preserve the antagonism of orchestra for piano, there ought to be greater contrasts. There ought to be larger dynamic spans and greater changes of tempi. And I was, at that time, and still am, I may say, in a Baroque-ish mood as far as even the 19th century concerto literature is concerned. I was trying to bring a common pulse to the movements and to hold things together in that, if rather arbitrary, nevertheless, for me, very convinced way. And this is what happened. It was simply the meeting at two points of our particular metamorphosis in which he was more in favor of the tradition which is accrued around the concerto style, and I wished at that moment to break with it.
You say at that moment.
I may change. I only imply that.
No, have you always felt that way about it?
About that particular piece, I have. I've not applied quite as extreme an analysis to other works of the same genre, but I have about that particular work. And so I was very grateful for the chance to do this, to exhibit it nationally, so to speak, on the radio. And I was very grateful to Mr. Bernstein for going along with this. And I felt it was only right that he should get off the hook himself.
All right. I want to come and hear you play it in 1970 and see what happens.
Good. I hope you can.
We've talked a long time, and I've enjoyed it very much. I hope you'll come again.
I will indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn Gould.